Okay, so we just got this final cleaned. So we cleaned the bolt holes. We took like brake parts cleaner and an air hose, or an air gun I mean, and just sprayed these really good several times. So threads are nice and clean. We got this gasket surface pretty much spotless. There's our new gasket. The looks like a good one, so I had to set the gasket on there, put the pump on, and there's only one bolt to torque for now. But once the bell housing goes on, we'll torque all the bolts to the final value, which is, I think, 45 foot-pounds. Alright, so we got this gasket surface cleaned up. So we just did the final clean on that surface. All we got left is we're going to oil these little rings. And then we're going to set the pump on here where it goes. And then we're going to put the input shaft in. A piece of advice I was given is basically make sure everything's perfectly centered up and everything goes in smooth and aligned up, and then we'll put all the bolts. So I got these bolts here. I know that background's dirty, but the bolts themselves are, I just got done cleaning them. So we'll put the bolts in, and only one of them gets torqued for now, because these are actually the bell housing bolts, but we're going to use those, we're going to put all of them in loose just for alignment purposes, and then we'll torque that one bolt that stays, and then remove the bell housing bolts after that. So here we go. Check it out. Got the pump put back in. This actually went together fairly well. So I got the gasket on, I set the pump in, and it didn't quite want to drop in all the way. It was real close. I had to wiggle it and wobble it, and finally it snapped in and was flush, because I read about that. You never want to use bolts to pull something down like that. If it doesn't drop in all the way, then something in the stack-up's wrong. But after a little wiggling, it popped in. And we put this in, we put all the other bolts in, just to keep it lined up. And we even went and got the torque converter and stuck it on, and gave it a little bit of a wobble to try to kind of self-align everything. We had our input shaft in, so really did everything we could to get this sucker lined up real nice. Then we took the converter off and then torqued that bolt. Now granted, we used a big old T-handle Allen, but we put that thing to probably 45 foot-pounds, so it's really tight. And that's it. Back the bolts out, the other bolts, and this part's ready to go. So we had thought about doing this servo. Marshall had mentioned pulling that apart. I thought about it, but the big problem is I don't have a gasket for that. So I can't really do that right now, and I'm not going to wait. Everything I've seen in this transmission so far was fairly clean. So I expect that there's probably some very light amount of fine metal in there, is probably the worst case. So we're going to run it. In the future, maybe I'll pull that cover off and check all that out, but for now we're not doing it. So I'm not sure what's next. I know we still need to put the filter on and the gasket for the pan. I actually got to drill and tap the pan. We're going to put a temperature sensor that goes to the computer and a temperature sensor that goes to a gauge. So we still got to do that, install those two sensors on the pan. But I'll tell you what, I'm tempted to take this transmission, go ahead and do that, put the pan on, torque all the bolts, to where basically this thing's ready to go, and then paint the whole thing. I'm thinking about painting it because it just kind of looks a little rough, and I know with a fresh coat of paint this thing would just look amazing. So kind of thinking we're going to do that, but we'll see. Alright, so we're getting ready to put this pan gasket back on, and we started doing our cleaning. So we got the gasket scraped off, we cleaned everything 2 or 3 times, and so this thing had a gasket leak. It always seemed like it was leaking around the front of the vehicle, or front of the car, front of the trans, which would be this side. It actually seemed to be close to the dipstick, but it didn't seem to be the dipstick leaking. And this is where the dipstick goes. It goes right here. Plugs in right there. So look what I found right by the dipstick hole. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Look at that. I don't know what caused that. Obviously, I didn't do any of this. It must have been that way whenever they built it, because they used cases. But there's scratch marks, some kind of grooves. And you can see some of these are like, you know, they start way down here, here, and go all the way across. And there's even some porosity, which is strange because there's no porosity anywhere else, but there's definitely porosity there. So that's strange. Not sure if the porosity is a casting defect, because you don't see it anywhere else. Maybe this had been repaired, but it doesn't look like it. It looks like a cast finish on the outside, just like the rest of the case. So kind of hard to explain. I don't know how that got there, but it doesn't matter because it is there. And I bet you this is where that pan's been leaking. It's kind of hard to capture the depth on a camera. Let's see, maybe right there. Yeah, it kind of shows up better. that might make it look exaggerated, but there's definitely grooves that run that length across where this gasket seals, pretty much all the way across. So you could see how a gasket might leak. You know, there's here too, it almost looks like there's a low spot right there with scratch marks and holes. So that doesn't look good. That might be the source of our leak that we've had forever. So I don't have an amazing way to fix this. What I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to take probably gray RTV. I'm going to put a very light coat and kind of push it into those grooves, and then take a razor blade and try to scrape it off to where hopefully the RTV just fills in the low spots. I don't know if that's going to work. If it doesn't, I'll just wipe it off with a rag, but I think I'm going to try that and see if it fixes the scratch marks, because I don't really know of a good way to fix this. So I'm fixing to try that and see what happens. So this is the RTV being applied. So I just pushed it in real tight, best I could. And now we're going to take a razor blade and scrape that off. Now we'll try to film this. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna try doing this without filming. Alright, so I redid it again and I basically got the same result. This is very telling regarding having a leak. So what you'll notice is when I did this method, it left a little thin layer of the RTV all across that top. You can see where it, you know, down here looks like aluminum, and then up there looks like RTV. Take the RTV out there. But anyway, that metal is low. You can see it built up and filled in those grooves. So, man, no wonder it leaked. So, I might need to fill in a couple scratches there too. I'll probably hit that spot real quick. But sure enough, this case was damaged. Kind of disappointed that this wasn't like fixed properly before they built my transmission. But sure enough, that's almost certainly, because it always seemed to leak right by the fill plug. Now I know why. Because the case was damaged and had a low spot and a bunch of scratches. So, crazy stuff. I'll show you this too while we're at it. So I have two gaskets. This is kind of funny. I have this gasket made by Lube Locker or something. Yeah, Lube Locker. This is an expensive gasket. And it's got like these triple things, and there's like a layer of metal and some squishy foam or something. I'm not really sure. It looks fancy. I don't know if that's a badass gasket or not, but one of the problems with this is the way they did the spacing between these. Like you see right here, this is the spot that is damaged on the case. Well, the metal on the case is real thin, and I don't think even one of these is actually going to reach that entire area. So this kind of looks like a gasket that looks awesome, but may not actually be awesome. And then funny enough, I bought a bunch of transmission filters, which I'm actually not super excited about the filters, but they came with a gasket, and the gasket isn't for the filter, it's for the pan. But this gasket appears to be some kind of like hard rubber, maybe not rubber, but you know, neoprene or something. It's kind of hard, but it is kind of like a rubber, and I got a feeling this is going to seal way better than this thing. It's harder, so like if you just barely torqued a pan, if you had like a sheet metal pan, this is more squishy, so maybe it would seal better. But this thing has a cast pan, and I should be able to torque the bolts fairly good without bending the flange. I got a feeling this is going to work a lot better. So we're actually going to use the cheap gasket. Now, the filter it came with, I'm not super excited about the filter. I'll try to show you a comparison. I don't know if this will really show up on camera very good, but we will try nonetheless. So here's the two filters. The one on the right is the original that was on the trans. The one on the left is the aftermarket one I got. And this probably isn't going to show up for crap. I'll try it. But basically the mesh size of this filter, yeah, so you zoom in, you see what that mesh size is? I'm just going to go across, see if I can get both of these in frame. That might make it easier. You can kind of see there. The one on the left just has a little bit bigger mesh than the one on the right. At least that's what it seems to be. Yeah. You can kind of tell there that the hole size, yeah. So the one on the right has a little bit finer screen than the one on the left. So I'd definitely rather have the finer screen so it prevents larger pieces of metal from getting in the trans. But I don't have that filter. Well, I have it, but it's dirty, and I'm not going to put that one in. So we're just going to use the new one. It's a little bit bigger mesh. And we're not going to do it right now, but what we're going to do in the future, the lines that go to the trans cooler in the back, we're going to put a spin-on filter and actually have a real filter for the trans, because these aren't filters, these are screens. They call it a filter, but that's just a wire mesh, you know. These are very high flow, which that part's awesome. You kind of need that. That's a lot of transmissions are like this. They don't have a real filter, it's just a mesh. So because they need to flow really good, low pressure drop, you put a restriction on the inlet of a pump and it cavitates. So most cars that actually have a filter for this, it's high pressure and it's in the lines that like go to the cooler or something. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to put an external one. So I still got to go find it. I need to put it on the list, but I need to go find one, spec it, order it, and then we'll put it in the back of the car. And whenever we're doing the cooler install, we'll just install that filter as well. And I think that'll be good for, you know, long-term transmission life. We're also going to put some magnets in the pan. So I actually got the magnets ordered, but they're not going to be here in time. So we're going to put this thing together without magnets in the pan. But I will probably take some general dimensions of this, because this pan's aluminum, and we're probably going to make a piece of metal that we put the magnets on. We'll like bond them to, and then we'll bond that to the pan or something. I haven't quite figured it out. Or maybe we'll bond the metal to the pan and then stick the magnets to it. That's probably what we'll do, because then you can pop the magnets off to clean them. But yeah, not now, but in the future, this pan will have several strong magnets in the bottom to help grab fine metal, and a filter to really clean that fluid up and keep it spotless. And that'll be a nice improvement, you know, for transmission life, I think. All right, y'all take it easy.